Hey everybody, it's Jonathan. It's Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Can you guys hear me okay? My computer here was about to crash before I went on, so hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Do me a favor, just leave me a quick comment if you can hear me first thing, that'd be appreciated. Much appreciated. Just trying to get some stuff set up here. Let me get rid of this and we're going to click out of that, remove this. All right. Can you guys hear me? Go Pats, that's right. Holy smokes, is that right? For those of you guys that don't know, I'm a big Patriots fan. And yeah, it's just been awesome to watch. Like, if you're a sports fan, I always warn my parents, like, don't be, what's the word? Uh, don't be such a homer, right, for your team that you lose learning from athletes and coaches and one of the best tidbits on YouTube, if you follow the Patriots on YouTube, like on their YouTube channel, they do the coaches press conferences every week, and I was listening to one last night with Josh McDaniels, who's the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. And an interesting thing that came up there was that you know for for a really long time he worked with like the best you know football quarterback ever in Tom Brady, who then became an older quarterback, right? Um, and then moved on, right? But then now he's working with Mac Jones, who's a rookie, who's a very young quarterback, and he talked about kind of what he likes about that situation, and one of the things that he really likes is pouring his knowledge into a young quarterback. So that's really, really, really cool to see. So again, don't if you're from New York, don't be a Giants fan. You're probably not a Jets fan. Don't be a don't be a San Francisco fan. Don't be a Chiefs fan. Be an everybody fan. Be a coach's fan. Be an athlete fan. So you learn that and encourage your athlete to do that the same as well, right? Like, so encourage your athletes to do that as well as if you're coaching. Okay. So yeah, so welcome everybody. If this is the first time you're hearing me, I'm Jonathan Edwards, Coach Edwards. I run lacrossegoalieuniversity.com. I also run athletespecific.com. Um, and I work with athletes in a variety of sports, not just lacrosse, but for lacrosse. Way back in the day, I was a high school American and a Division One recruit. I was also an Olympian in a completely different sport. So I run these Facebook Lives because lacrosse is my first love, my true love, and every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, we run these Facebook Lives, and we cover at least an hour's worth of footage, usually more. Greg, I know you guys can attest to that, and that's a Jonathan Redford. Oh no, I'm late. Mary James, I see you. Welcome. And who's that? I can't tell who that is. I'm gonna have to click over here and log. Oh, I'm not all logged in anywhere. Dang it! Dang it! Dang it! Dang it! That's I've been having a really weird technology week. All right, so for those of you guys, that are here, and again, lots of people checking in late, and which is par for the course. But got some good topics to talk about tonight. We've got a wide range of people who listen to my Facebook lives and my podcasts and my videos and stuff. We've got a lot of lurkers. There's Alex Figueroa. I see you, buddy. Rob S is in. Good to see you, buddy. And Yeah, so we've got everything from like parents with young with young goalies, all the way up to college coaches who lurk and email me later beyond after the fact. Hey there, Paul Smith. Good to see you, buddy. And Paul, yes, I got your clip. We're gonna be talking about that tonight. So that was really, really cool. And I was one step ahead of you, Paul, we're going to cover that. So a lot of good stuff to talk about tonight. For those of you guys that were on last week, we talked about stuff for Christmas, and I hope you consider a couple of things for Christmas. One is my book on Amazon, which is an athlete's guide to winning in sports and life. I really hope you guys will put that in your athlete stocking, but also in your stocking, because one of the things that I find the people that have bought my book is that they tend to pick a chapter and read it with their athlete. All right, and this is I've had accounts of this as young as like 10, where the book is written in such a way where you can just kind of pick a section and just dive into some particular aspect of your athletes. challenges. Like I got an email this week from one of our Lacrosse Goalie University members, asking about like, hey, what do you do when your goalie's like young and kind of distracted, and how do you keep him focused? Because as parents, you want him to be like a normal, quote unquote, normal kid. But if you want to be elite in anything, you're going to be a little bit abnormal. But a lot of parents freak out when their kid's not like doing push-ups while they're emptying the dishwasher and between homework assignments, like I did. And so not every kid is like that. But so I hope you'll consider that as a purchase for not just your athlete but your family. And then for those of you guys that like gear, I'm hoping to God to have our website set up to be able to get rid of some of these sweatshirts and t-shirts to you guys. But yeah, it's a good time of year. So, um, Coach Casey McDonald in from Louisiana, good to see you, and Mike Tupin in from Massachusetts, good to see you as well. All right, as always. So, yeah, let's get cracking, shall we? Um, I need to get my paper out. And all right. So, one of the things that I want to start with this week is a topic that came up a couple weeks ago in our Facebook group. It was I believe a dad posted a video of their goalie picking off a pass, right? And everybody was like, hey, that's cool." And I couldn't find the clip actually. I can't remember where the clip was, but we'll just talk about it because so you guys don't have to stare at a screen if you don't want to. But the idea is that this goalie was probably about 12, 13 years old and picks off a pass and books up field with it, right? And what I learned later was that the coach of this goalie basically told the goalie not to do that anymore. And that bugs me like right away, right? Like it bugs me. And so I wanted to talk a lot about this, just some concepts that as parents, as coaches, that you kind of just hear me out. And because some people are like, yeah, the goalie should go. And other people are like, oh, no, the goalie shouldn't go. And I want to find that common ground for everybody and understand like why. Because, um, you know, for those of you guys that follow me and my work and my kind of my approach is like I believe that just we just haven't seen the best goalies play this sport. And one of the things that happens is a lot of coaches coach out of kids those features and tactics and approaches to the game that are going to make them a game changing goalie down the road. And Yeah, Chad Pastor writes, picking off passes is one of my goalie's favorite things. Yeah, it was mine too. Like I remember when I was a young lacrosse goalie, like when I was in like eighth grade, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, I was not the most athletic kid. I didn't become athletic until like kind of my junior, senior year of high school. And although people tell me otherwise, but I didn't really feel athletic as a goalie. And part of it was that, when I went to Derby Academy in Hingham, Massachusetts, was we had to wear like all sorts of gear. And that gear was heavy, man. Like that was heavy. But the idea was when I got into kind of high school and uh, that ability to roam and that ability to kind of be proactive really came from a frustration. And a lot of you guys, if you guys relate to this, just drop a comment. But the idea is it came out of frustration as a goalie because when your team's not great and your defense isn't great, you start thinking proactively, right? You start thinking about like cutting off passes and you kind of taking that next step, right? And so I made a bunch of notes today to talk about this, but the first word that came to my mind when I thought about like why does a goalie do this? And the first word that came to mind was frustration. Okay. So but I want to dig into that so you guys understand what's going on. And so um the first thing to understand is that lacrosse goalies can do things at young ages that they can't do at older ages, right? So I think we all agree to that. For those of you that have experience in the game, like Rob Shepard and some of the guys that have older goalies, you totally get this. But the idea is like your young goalie can probably like get a loose ball, and if they're athletic, they can run downfield, right? They can run past their D and past some of their middies and just get the ball downfield and get in trouble, boys and girls. Okay. Um, Frank Segretto, my daughter just looked at me and smiled in agreement. Love it. Yes, love it. Alex writes, I've seen many girls take a step away from the cage when the ball is at X to deter passes taught by my daughter's club coach. So, Alex, I'm gonna make a note to talk about that because I don't totally agree with that, but whatever, we'll get there. Okay. But that's one of those things that at younger ages, especially on the girls' side, girls can step out and kind of defend the front of the cage from the when the ball's at X. But over the years, we've seen college goalies that get totally picked apart by that. And so anyway, that's no big deal, whatever. But it works at the young age. So running the ball downfield is another one. Um, Coming out and hitting kids for the boys and for the girls too. Come on. I know it's not legal for the girls, but the girls can come out and crush, can bust ball or how do I say that? Bust boobs, bust balls, like just knock kids over, right? Rock ovaries, however you want to describe it to be fully offensive. Let's go. All right. And picking off passes. So Alex, to your point, picking off passes, that's another one. Okay. Um, but here's the thing is that goalies think about things more than other players on the field at all ages. Okay. And so what I mean by that is like, when the stress of stopping the ball hits a goalie, right? And that frustration that I explained, like that frustration point, like, I'm just sick of getting scored on. I'm gonna take things into my own hand. You know, if everybody else on the team had that same mentality, the goalie would see less balls, right? And but like, you know, to give you some examples, like the face-off guy or girl, I always think back to when Notre Dame lost like the national championship in overtime, whatever year that was, with Scotty Rogers in the cage, and I just think of nobody looks at the face-off guy, as much as they look at Scotty Rogers getting scored on, right? Like that's just the reality of it, And so that face-off guy, yes, feels bad about losing the face-off, but it's not the same weight that the goalie gets, right? Goalie feels, right? And as Brendan Cullinan, talked last week when I interviewed him, he's like, God, nobody feels that as much as like the goalie and the goalie's parents do, right? So that's really important to understand. The attack, same thing. Like if the attack like hucks a ball over the other attackman's head and it goes out of bounds and we lose possession, it comes down and they score. Everybody's looking at like the goalie and then the D, not they're not looking back at the attack who messed at the pass. Same thing goes for the defense. Like God, I see so many bad defensive plays even at like the D1 level, pro level, and I'm just like, dang it, nobody's like just kicking themselves as much as the goalie is, right? So that's really important to understand. Middies too. I'll throw the middies in there as well. Okay. No one thinks about this stuff as much as a goalie. So what happens then is that the goalie's mind, as soon as they overcome kind of any sort of fear of the ball, they can kind of focus. Even I guess when they even if they have some of that frustration and they may not be making all the saves they need to make, but they're just starting to think like, oh, okay, this pass is going to go there, and then I could pick off that pass, I could run, or how many times has a ball hit a goalie and the ball, like I remember this distinctly in high school once, making a save like off my knee, I kind of lunged out at the ball in my shin knee area, hit the ball, and the ball was shot from like top right, and it ricocheted top left, like out, like and it ended up going out of bounds, right? And I ended up nobody saw that ball except me and the shooter, and I ran and I literally got to the sideline. I was like the first guy to the sideline up by the midfield stripe and got that ball. And so, as goalies, we get to see all this stuff happening and after the ball hits us, we kind of know where that rebound goes. But what happens is that within a team, the goalie is the one who thinks the most about clears. He thinks about man down. He thinks about, or she, sorry, I want to include everybody in this one. Communication and slides, and the goalie knows like which defender is like picking their nose and not the they're not the brightest bulb in the box sort of thing, and which one's a couple fries short of a Happy Meal, and that sort of thing, right? The goalies think about that stuff, and so what happens is you can get a goalie at any age, but also very young ages where they start to venture out, right? They start to go and they want to like stuff a girl or they want to pick off a pass and run. And then what can happen though is that the goalie does that. And so for this we're talking about picking off passes. So the goalie runs out, picks off a pass, and nobody on their team knows what the hell's going on, right? They look back and the goalie's not in the cage anymore. Maybe that goalie is like, running down the sideline and well, shit, we haven't practiced that ever because coach always blows the whistle after the shot goes, either in the cage or wide to give it back to the offense again. And so that goalie ventures out and outruns everybody. And like to use a football term, right? They outrun their coverage, right? So now they're vulnerable and they got nobody to pass to because nobody's told the attack how to play in that situation, and nobody's treated the goalie like a midi who's standing in the crease. Right. And that's really what this all comes down to. Okay. Let me, Rob Shepard writes, Ashby said he has to set his feet and not pinch his knees when people are shooting now. Good. Stay on topic. Stay on topic. Um, but um, better to pick off a pass. Who wrote that? Sean Cotty wrote, it's better to pick off a pass and miss than go for the check and miss. Well, we just want it all. I just want it all to happen, right? So you should be. Well, again, it's all timing, Sean, but we'll get to that. But just kind of on a macro scale here, though, the idea, the concept here is that a lot of coaches, what ends up happening is the goalie gets the ball, runs out of the cage, and runs upfield, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. And the other thing that I heard like this past week was another goalie getting criticized by his coach for calling switches with the defense. So what that is, if you don't know what that is, like okay, that in a if it's a 2-on-2 sort of situation and one offensive player goes to set a pick for the ball carrier, um, depending on how that play evolves, the defender who was originally covering the ball carrier may not be able to get through the pick, and then they switch. So the defender who was covering the pick guy now just takes the ball carrier. So I hope that makes sense, right? I'm going quick here on that one, but again, the coach was like, no, you shouldn't be calling that. The D need to be calling that. Well, so I was like, well, wait a second. If the goalie is the one thinking that far ahead, then that is something to be encouraged, not discouraged. And lacrosse, for some of you, you've heard me say this, but lacrosse is the next to football is probably the most complicated sport to coach, in my opinion, because as someone who played ice hockey and soccer and baseball and field lacrosse, um, and someone who's coached soccer and coached hockey and coached field lacrosse, I can tell you hands down that nothing is more difficult to coach than field lacrosse is. And so part of that is also the activity of the goalie, right? The active nature of the goalie. And so what's really fascinating to me is like when I look at the college game today and I look at the pro game today, there's so many things that have been coached out of people that if they were just left in those people and the coaches took it to the rest of the team. Okay. And so what I mean by that, when you take it to the rest of the team, is that if you look at your goalie, right? And so everybody are, goalies always argue for wearing less equipment so they can be mobile and they can run. Well, okay, let's use them, right? Let's use them. And so, but then, you know, anyway, that's another, we'll get to that. But the idea here is that if we want our goalies to have that mobility, then we need to start treating them like that, and coaches need to treat them like that. So for a lot of you listening to me now, I know you have coaches that just don't get this, right? But if you just do this mental exercise and you take your team's best midfielder and say, let's say this. Okay, so your goalie recognizes that they have the opportunity to pick off a pass. And this happens a lot, especially in man down situations. The ball is coming. I used to do this all through high school. I remember, the ball would go like top right, side right, and then the pass would go from like side right to X. And then I could just bust out like on an angle, like running to like back right. And I could pick off that pass and then I would curl upfield. Well, the first school I did that out, my team was like, a bunch of nimrods and nobody knew what the hell's going on. And I used to cheap the ball. I call it, I used to cheap the ball long towards the attack because it was safer down there than it was down here. But when I got to high school, when I got around good high school players, Brian Hill, um, no matter where Brian was, he was a midi. No matter where Brian was on the man down, he knew that if that pass was going to happen, I was going to get it, and he just started busting up field, and I would hit him, and we'd have a fast break going. We'd have a man down fast break going the other way. Okay, so nothing has changed in the game of lacrosse where that is still not possible, and it doesn't matter if it's the boys' game or the girls' game. It's the same, it can happen in both sports, right? Or both both disciplines, right? But the idea is like, let's imagine this for a second. Take your goalie, put them in a cage. Imagine that they go pick off a pass. Now, at the moment they pick off that pass, let's say we could just freeze time and we could transfer your goal, like the goalie, for the best midi on the team, like your best stick handling, like runs like a gazelle midfielder, right? And boom, we're just gonna morph them. We're into that goalie now. Now, where does your goalie go? I don't know, but just for the purpose of this exercise, just stay with me. All right. But just think of this: how would the team look at that player now that they're not a goalie? Right? You would have like basically a short stick with the ball, and they can run and they can pass, and the team would be taught to just break out, right? But what happens for most teams at all sorts of ages, even like at really good high school levels, um, there's usually some mom in the stand. It's the mom first that gets the butt pucker and screams, "Get back in the cage!" Right? And everybody freaks out, and then all learning is lost. But again, if you just look at your goalie like they're a midi, and your goalie should be aspiring to be athletic and have stick skills and be able to do that stuff. And now the team's going to go, all right, pardon me, but shit's going down, right? Jimmy's got the ball, right? Karen got the ball. Karen's my goalie in this case. Um, but the idea is like, okay, we're going to make the other team pay. That was a stupid pass. Our goalie picked it off. Let's go. Right. That's what needs to come from your coach. And what happens a lot of times is that coaches are tapped out. Like it's like some teams, like they're just trying to put in an offense for Pete's sake. Like, come on, Jimmy, just stay in the cage. Don't run. It's like, or they say something like, don't leave the crease, or worse, they tether them to the cage, right? The idea here is that you want your goalie to experiment and try. And now, as a coach, if I look at my goalie and go, dang it, Jimmy's got some wheels, right? Or even if like Jimmy's like 300 pounds and he picked the goal so he didn't have to run, but he realizes that he can go out and pick off a pass in certain situations. I want to reward that. And the way I'm going to reward that as the coach, first I'm going to say, hey, great decision, right? Worst case scenario, Jimmy, just chuck it long, right? Chuck it downfield. We'll let the attack sort it out. And there's ways to play that, by the way. I won't get into it today. Um, but the idea here is that okay, wow, Jimmy now has learned something. Jimmy can see the field better than anybody else, and he's taken a risk, and he goes out and he gets the ball. And so, what do I need to do as a coach? I got to teach the rest of my team what's going to happen, right? And so, a lot of times this happens in a man down situation. Okay, this is where I think it's more prone to happen as man down. Can happen in even strength too. In even strength, it's great because for the boys, you now have like a man advantage as you're heading upfield, and you can really make things happen. But the idea is that all rules apply. You know, draw and dump. Like when just like if again, I'm not looking at a goalie, I'm looking at a midi with a good stick and good wheels, and I'm going to say, all right, what are we going to do? Well, draw and dump. Right, ball carrier has priority. Who's on sides? Right, oh, Jimmy gets the ball, yells clear. Well, okay, we're going to do the same things we always do. We're going to take our defensive midfielder and we're going to get him to the sideline. We're going to sub on a short stick, but that short stick's going to come on sides just in case Jimmy's got to go over. Or maybe there's a long pole in front of him because they inverted of the defense. Like what, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to, he's got to paddle. All rules apply. Doesn't matter if it's a goalie or not. So what bothers me is when I see like really good goalies at the high school level where the coach just goes, no, 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 we don't do that, you know, or Mrs. Jones in the stand, her sphincter is so tight because her goalie has just run out of the cage and she's screaming, like, get back in the cage. Right. No, like, no, you got to tell Mrs. Jones with the sphincter to just be quiet. because she's ruining it for everybody. All right. But so the deal is that you have to, um, so as a parent, if you've got a goalie who understands this and the coach says, I don't want to ever see you leave the cage again, you've got to have a relationship with that coach enough to go like, okay, wait a second. Come on, let's we're trying to get to the next level here, right? But the idea is your coach is feeling the stress because now they have to teach something else that they're like, oh my god, I can't even get to that yet. But I argue, I'm like, no, you can get to it now because it takes is an understanding of like, hey, we're going to treat the goalie when they leave the cage just like any other player on the field, right? Ball carrier has priority. We're going to draw and dump. We're going to get open for him. In this situation, you can run this way, you can run that way. He can make a pass to you. Worst case scenario, she can cheap it long in the offensive zone, and we'll get our attack to fight it out in their defensive half of the field. And to be honest, you'll probably come up with a really good loose ball and good transition and probably score off it, right? So please, 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 if you're a coach, encourage your goalie to, if they have the athletic ability, okay, and if they can think at this level, right, to take those risks. You know, one of my Lacrosse Goalie University members this year has been so fantastic to watch. Like, this is a kid who was late to the sport, late to the position. Right? This is a high school age kid, and the first like 3 months we worked together, it was all about like ball stopping, and it was all about just ability, to just get in front of the ball and make those saves. But then it was like, all right, let's venture out, right? Let's draw and dump. Let's get you in the offensive zone on a clear. And sure as shit, like that stuff's coming, right? And that's awesome. And so here's a goalie who is, technically young to the sport, like a young training age, smart, like advanced psychological age, right? Um, uh, he can run, he's athletic, but it's like, let's go, let's use that. Let's treat you like a midi in the cage. So please, 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 please encourage your goalies. And if you've got a coach who's like, no, don't ever do that, like try to find a time to meet with that coach and go, hey, listen, you know, um, and there's too much to talk about here on this in this case to give you like an example of what to talk about, but the idea is you have to have that relationship with your coach to go like, all right, we can actually create a threat out of here. Now, if you're a complete douchebag and you talk to your coach and you call him a jerk and you call him like that he doesn't know what the hell he's doing, then you deserve every bit of hell you get from your coach. So I'm not giving you that advantage or that not advantage. What was the word I'm looking for? But anyway, okay, makes sense. Right. So any questions? Mary James writes, I find this with my young guy looking to be out more and make things happen. And most parents are always saying those words. He's out of the crease. Yeah. So one of the things that I've done pretty much with every team I've ever played in every sport, and this or every sport I've ever coached, including my son's like U11 soccer team, it's some form of don't let your inside fear be your outside voice. Okay. And that's really hard, right? That's really, really hard. I went to an event years ago, actually, the Changing the Game project. They came to Edmonton, which is like 3 hours north of where I live, and I drove up to go see them play or see them talk, and I was so disappointed in the talk because um, one of the things they show this video of like a mom on the sideline, just screaming and yelling and jumping up and down and running up and down the sideline, and she's kind of like she looks like she was a gymnast in her younger ages, right? She's still like super fit, blonde, big glasses, well dressed, but she's like go 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 go, and the some dude who took this video with his iPhone like pulls back, and the kids are like 4, and they use this as an example to basically like I want to like cheer shame what's the word we use, but like cheer shame this mom. And I was like, dude, listen, so some of you have heard me say this, but like when we communicate, I heard this out of a book called A Course in Miracles. This idea that like when we communicate, it's either an act of love or a cry for help. Right, that's it. Every bit of communication can boil down to those two things: an act of love or a cry for help. And when I see a mom like that, even that mom in the stand with a tight sphincter who goes, "Get back in the cage," right? The idea is like that's that's actually kept probably a little bit of both. It's a cry for help, but it's also an act of love because she just wants your goalie get hurt, right? Or her athlete get hurt. But that's where as a coach, you've got to go to your parents and go, listen, I know this is gonna be the hardest thing ever for you, but you can't scream that. Like you just can't. Because we want to encourage that. And here's why. Right. And so if you take that, if a coach can take the time to explain that to the parents, um, then um, in a way where it's well received, then good things can happen. Otherwise, it stifles everything, right? Like Jimmy the long pole is going like, "Oh, wait a second, I got to get back in the cage now," and he forgets all of his clearing fundamentals, right? Because Kevin's mom in the stands is freaking out with her Starbucks, or maybe her mimosa Tropicana, going like, "Oh my god!" Right? So no, it's like one of those Brooke Shields, Andre Agassi moments. So yeah, so you got to do that. So Mary, that's a great point, but in that case, you got to tell your goalie, no, listen, you're doing the right thing. Just play it like if you see that loose ball and you go for it, just play it like you're a midi, play it like you're a long pole. What would you do in that situation? You'd run up field, right? You draw somebody, you dump to the open man. If you don't draw anybody, you keep going. Well, mom, what if I get to the midfield stripe? Keep going. Somebody else will be on sides for you. The ball carrier has priority, right? That's the rules, right? That's the rules. Like for Ashby, same thing. If Ashby doesn't score this spring, I'll be pissed. Pissed, Rob Shepard. Pissed with a capital S. Two S's. That makes sense? All right, everybody. All right. Good questions, Mary. Appreciate that. Um, all right. All right. He smiled. He smiled. That's awesome. All right, Ashby. Be a threat, dude. Be a threat. There you go, Paul. Be a threat. Be a threat. Make them pay, man. Make them pay. Like I loved that feeling in high school when like I said, like man up, man, or we were man down, and the opposing team, that attackman at X was just too close to the back of the crease. And I'd be in my stance like I wasn't doing anything, and I'd see that pass going, boom, I was gone. Right? Did I miss it a couple times? Sure, sure, but no harm, no foul, no big deal. But when I made it, and Brian Hill freaking took off at a 45-degree angle from like top left up towards the midfield stripe, and I would just loop a pass to him, and down he went for a fat. We scored on that all the time. Scored on that all the time. So be a threat, make them pay. All right. So moving on, this is a kind of a fun one. So a couple weeks ago, I'm a little behind on this, but a couple weeks ago, a lot of our goalies, a lot of family members or families part of this group, and some goalies I've worked with, some goalies I worked with years ago, but they signed their NLI. And so, what's an NLI? It's a National Letter of Intent. And so, there's some interesting things about the National Letter of Intent. And I'm not going to get into all the details about the NLI, but it's like, it's funny because it's become such a thing. High school is putting up the banners, treating it totally like up some college, athlete signing a pro contract, like they got drafted in the NFL or something like that. And it's like, some junior in high school somewhere. But um, the idea is that the National Letter of Intent is basically supposedly a contract between an athlete heading to a Division 1 or Division 2 school who's getting money. Okay. And so it's a big deal. And there's a lot of great for our Lacrosse Goalie University members. I'm gonna put an article inside Lacrosse Goalie University in the recruiting section for you guys to check this out. Um, but um, but for everybody else, the idea is that you're getting the symbolism of the NLI is like you've made it. Like you've absolutely made it. And this everything you've been working for is like it's all come down to this, baby, right? And so one of the things that I want parents of goalies to understand is that there's really two phases of development for a lacrosse goalie, in my opinion. And actually, this applies to any other position, but since we're all talking about goalies, here it is. The idea is that you're trying to get your goalie ready to get recruited For those of you that have goalies that are capable of that, it's this idea like there's this window to get like recruited somewhere. But then if you don't really hit that window for whatever reason, and your kid goes through high school and doesn't really have, they're going to end up being a walk on somewhere. Nobody thinks too much about the second phase, which is like, walking on somewhere, playing like freshman, sophomore year, and then becoming like a starter, your junior, senior year, right? And that's for my generation of athlete. Like we all, that was always the thing. It's like you expected to go to college and play like 2 years, spend time on the bench, and then get your chance, right? Now it's kind of like, oh, if you're not starting your freshman year of college, like just forget it. And that's not true, right? That's not true. And so a lot of people miss that. A lot of athletes like turn off the tap like after high school if they haven't gotten recruited and think like, oh, I'm done, you know. And so, I've had to talk a lot of athletes off the cliff, when they come out of high school and they're not like the best in their class. And I'm like, dude, it's not a big deal. Like you're gonna go find a school that you really want to go to now, right? That probably has the degree you probably want to take, and then you'll have a chance to actually like earn a degree and and then get a chance to walk on like and start like I so very famously back in like the 90s at Syracuse. There was a kid, and the name always escapes me, but there's a kid at Syracuse who was like a music major. Syracuse has a great music program, and he was like the 25th attackman on that team. I don't know. There was like the Gates, like a whole bunch of Canadians, and then this kid, and he ended up starting his senior year as an attackman, and I wish I could remember that kid's name, but he was like a piano major or something like that, and which was totally cool, like super cool, right? But the idea is like there's two windows, and so the NLI, what ends up happening is that everybody focuses on the NLI, right? It's like, oh my god, national letter of intent. Oh my god, NLI. Everybody, all your signs is great. What happens, and this is horrible, is that if your athlete thinks that when they sign that NLI or they get the chance to be there, that they have somehow made it, that is like the worst thing that could happen to your athlete. Now, if your athlete is not someone who signs an NLI, I want to encourage you to look at some of those kids and realize that okay, that NLI is basically an agreement between the coach and the athlete. It has nothing to do actually with the NCAA. That's a myth. Like people don't understand that. It has nothing to do with the NCAA. It has everything to do by what was called the Collegiate Commissioners Association, and it was a way to somehow keep coaches or athletes from backing out of their verbal scholarship offer. Right, that's kind of the deal. But I can tell you from experience that the NLI isn't worth the paper it's signed to. Um, in some cases, yes, but I've had athletes where they have verbals and the coach just goes, "Meh." They make up some excuse to kind of degrade the kid and pull the NLI, right? So if a coach wants to do that, if coach is over recruited, and they've got like 12 attackmen and they've got to dump three, then they'll find a way to get out of that. So I don't really like the NLI. But if someone is looking at like another kid who signed an NLI and they go like that, people think that their kid that kid is now done. It's like okay, they're going to be on the team. They can picture them on the field, and that happens sometimes. But what a lot of people don't understand is that those kids will fall prey to the fact that they've made it when in fact this is now when the work needs to begin. Okay, so so a common problem across all sports, and when I work with athletes in other sports, I see it again and again and again. Everybody thinks incorrectly. They think that everybody's on the same ladder, right? If I'm a goalie and there's another goalie in my age category and that kid's like a little bit better than me, and I'm not catching up like technically or physically or whatever, I just you just kind of picture yourself 2, 3, 4 years at the same rungs on that ladder. Just the ladder is like I don't know, longer or bigger or over there, whatever. But the idea is that a lot of stuff can happen between now and whenever. Um, I've seen all sorts of things happen to kids. Like I've seen kids like ruin their own situation because their life skills suck. I knew a goalie who in high school was like straight A student, never drank, barely partied, didn't drink, no drugs, got to college, his first time away from home, basically, became a full-blown alcoholic within 3 months of being on campus. Okay? I'm not saying that's gonna happen to your kid, but nobody thought it was gonna happen to that kid either. But there's other kids, athletes that looked up to that kid and thought like, "Oh man, I'm never gonna be like that kid." Well, they only think about it athletically. They don't think about all the other stuff that goes on. Like if you step on campus and you don't do anything when it comes to like the academics that you're required to do, or the support you're given, and or you party, or you get into trouble, or you get your girlfriend pregnant, or any of those things, all those things can derail that scholarship position. And like I said, that NLI is only guaranteed for one season. Okay, 1 year. And so I, the there's a lot of different directions I can go on this, but the idea here is that I personally I hate the NLI day. I think we're just like hyping up something that really doesn't make any sense. It's great. It's like, hey, you just told the world that I think the coolest thing would be you sign your NLI and nobody knows that you did it, right? Nobody knows, right? You're just like, yep, okay, got it. You're at the kitchen table, mom, dad, grandpa asleep in the chair, whatever, and you sign your NLI and you fax it or scan it or send it back to the coach and go, "Yo, I'm coming." And you're like, "Yeah," because then you know that the work begins now, right? And the work begins, yeah, now. Um, a lot of goalies, it's funny. In my experience, like I've had some goalies sign NLIs, but it never really turned out to much because for a lot of those goalies, they got on campus and the coaches are still recruiting, right? The coaches are still recruiting, and they may take a goalie this year. They may have two walk-ons next year, and you've got to work, man. Like you've got to work. For the girls, it's been a little bit different, but some of my some of the goalies that I've had the chance to work with, um, the ones that turned out the best were the ones that kind of walked on and then worked their ass off. The girls that got like heavily recruited out of high school showed up on campus, and then all sorts of stuff goes down when you get on campus freshman year. All sorts of distractions come into play. And so you really want to prepare your goalie to just be like, all right, listen, now the work begins. Um, current player, Paul Smith, current player is not going to give up their spot for you. You'll need to work harder to earn the spot. That's true. That's very, very true. Um, so I want, um, I, w- I don't always talk about this stuff. Like I lean more towards the work. I lean more towards the improvement. Um, and I think in that way, sometimes I'm a pretty serious coach, as you guys can tell. Um, I and when NLI day comes, which I think is what, November 10th or whatever it is. Yeah, it's great. And yeah, it's exciting, but I'm like, dude, you have no idea what's about to happen. And I look at those kids and I just realize, like, are they at the right school? And if you want to take a really positive attitude, like if you don't get your chance to sign an NLI, it's not the end of the world. It's probably actually the beginning of the best time for you, because the choices that you then make as an athlete are such that you're going to end up on a campus almost regardless of lacrosse, right? Like, every kid when they come up with their college list, like I've got a brand new lacrosse goal university member this week, and I asked him like, "Okay, what's your college list?" And they all look the same. They all look the same. It's like Duke, Notre Dame, whatever, like Loyola, Harvard, you name it. Like it's all on the same list. And if you think about it, like if you don't end up getting a scholarship D1, D2, now you're like, okay, well, wait, well, now this changes everything, because now I got to go to the place where, one, that my family can afford. It's a big deal. Okay. And then two, uh, one that has my major. Maybe there's some friends there of mine that are going to be there, or it's close to home, or it's a big school, it's a little school, like whatever. But it almost takes uh, it almost takes the hype off it, and now a goalie makes a better decision, which they should be making to begin with, right? That's the most important thing. So for those of you that didn't, that are listening to me and you didn't sign this year at an NLI, like you didn't get your scholarship, man, there's so many opportunities for you still, right? Because you can get to that campus you want to go to, you can walk on, and you can bust ass for 2 years and become go from becoming like a man baby to a man, or a woman baby to a woman, and that's a big deal, right? You can grow into your paws, so to speak, and you will be a completely different kid, um, um, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all that stuff in 2 years, right? So that's the most important part of it. So, um, you know, there's a lot of I'm not getting into all the technical stuff on the NLI and how the scholarships work and things like that. To be honest, I could care less, because at the end of the day, it all just comes down to like your athlete being like so damn good that they have to pick them. That if if you can look up all that stuff, and you've got to have your certification from the eligibility center, you've got to have your grades. Like, I've known kids that signed the NLI in November, got a DUI in March, and lost their NLI by the middle of March, right? So that's something to consider as well. Like, you don't want to hope anything ill will on people, but if you lots of things can happen in people's life, and so keep that in mind. All right, keep that in mind when you see other athletes signing NLIs that you may respect. You can respect them athletically, but you can also outwork them athletically, and then you can also uh, work on your life skills so that you can become a better human being and a better athlete by the time it's time to play. All right, does that make sense? Any questions on the NLI? Yes, Joel Rose, you're late. It's all good. It's all good, man. Um, if you any questions, any comments, go ahead and pop them in the box. That's really good. It looks like I'm frozen on Facebook. I apologize if I'm still frozen on Facebook for you guys. I don't know why I'm frozen on Facebook over there, but that should clear up shortly, hopefully. Um, all right. If not, welcome back. There we go. Okay. All right. So moving on. 5150. Hey, 5150. Van Halen, Sammy Hagar. Who knew? All right. Yeah, you guys will unfreeze in a second, I believe. I'm not sure why I'm freezing, but hopefully you guys can still hear me even if I'm frozen. Sorry, guys, if that's the case. All right, so last one of the day. This is kind of fun. I probably just have way too much stuff open on my computer. So, no, that's a Facebook thing if I'm freezing. So this is kind of fun. Uh, this is going to be a little video intensive for you guys to have a look at. But Paul, Paul. You did. Um, um, why am I? Yeah, I'm frozen. No, I'm frozen there, there, there. Yeah, that's a Facebook thing. Sorry, guys. Um, all right. Sorry there, guys. Let me see comments. Just frosty, not frozen. Just okay, cool. Not frozen. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that. I'm frozen on my Facebook account here. Oh, there we go. No, I'm good now. All right. Let me just restart this. 53. Okay, let's let's get going here. All right. Um Offensive lacrosse goaltending. So I'm gonna kind of now and to the start of the new year, I'm gonna be doing more of kind of my take on the lacrosse goalie of the future, what that means, offensive goaltending, and just to kind of give you guys more of that attitude to work with. Um, for those of you that are um, that really want to adopt this idea of the lacrosse goalie of the future, like when you think. So I had a strength conditioning coach I worked with kind of back in my Olympic days, a guy by the name of Alan Cosgrove in Santa Clarita, California. Phenomenal guy, Scottish guy, brilliant. Um, and there's a couple principles that I learned from him, and one was if you take two athletes of equal technical ability, the one with better physical ability will win, right? If you think about that, so from like if we're going to battle for a ball in the corner, if I'm physically stronger than you, and we're equal technically, then I am probably going to push you off that ball. Like as a goalie, same thing. I can see the ball, I can know where it's going, and then I can go to move in front of that ball. Well, if I'm physically stronger than you, I'm going to be able to cover that ground faster than you, right? Because I'm stronger. So, um, so the idea is that when we look at improving a goalie's performance, if your goalie is just looking at other like pro goalies or worse, other high school goalies in their age category, and they're trying to basically outskill them, uh, you're you're on a recipe for frustration, right? So this is why I say like I don't want your goalie to get stuck in the doing of goaltending, right? It's fun. Like being in the cage is fun and making saves is fun and getting shot on is fun, but it's getting in the gym is hard, right? Um, doing sprints is hard. Dropping body fat is hard. Um, Getting better grades is hard. So, but the idea is that when I look at improving the lacrosse goalie, if you're just looking at Kyle Bernlohr and Tim Troutner and Jack and Cannon, and you're just trying to be like them physically, well, you're gonna be like them. But the improvements that happen in sport come when you start to apply like things outside of sport, right? And so Jay Abraham is a kind of a business and marketing dude. Wrote a book called "Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got," and he talks about business and he talks about marketing. When one company copies another company within their category, it's like marketing incest. He calls it. So I call this like athlete incest. As a goalie, you look at another goalie and you're gonna do what they're doing. It's like goalie incest, right? You're just everybody's doing the same stuff, right? And that's what I'm trying to get people to break out of is this idea that okay, if you do what everybody else is doing, uh, physically, technically, tactically, well, you're going to have like incremental gains. But I think what's happened is that goalies have gotten worse relative to the improvement of everybody else in the field. Shooters have gotten better. Rules have made it so that the defense don't want to hit anymore, and defensemen have like sucked. And so shots are faster and more creative in both the men's and the girl and the boys and the girls game, and then the goalie is just like there, just like they were standing there in 1992, right? Same gear, same sticks, same everything, um, less protected, right? Because equipment is thinner and lighter and whatever. So it just doesn't make any so we're seeing lacrosse like save percentage goes down, right? I mean, I think the save percentage at last year's national championship was like 44%, right? Some of you guys might remember what that was exactly, but it was less than 50. And that's crap. Like it just doesn't make sense to me, right? So what makes sense to me though is looking for places within the game to make offensive moves as a goalie, right? So I think for the most part, people look at the goalie position as being a receiving position. I heard somebody describe it as a female position, being one where goalies are fairly passive and um they're receiving the ball, like they're catching the ball, they're not shooting the ball, right? So for those of you guys that get offended at the female analogy, just click away, please. So the idea though is that I think mentally there's a mindset there where it's like, okay, I'm just trying to react to everything you send my way, right? And so I'm trying to just be as quick and we see that. Like that's how like Kyle Bernlohr plays. That's what that Tim Troutner video I did a few weeks ago though is different, where he's coming out and he's going like, no, I'm going to dictate this, and that's what I love. That's what I've been talking about for like ever, right? So and it's like turning the freaking Titanic with some of you guys, okay? But the idea, so there was a Instagram post this week, um, and who wrote this? If you only fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. If it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. That's good. That's good stuff. Who's that? Who's that? Who's that? Who's that? Can't tell who that was. Who is that? Hey, Sean. Good to see you. Okay, Sean. Good stuff. All right. So the idea here though is let me just click over to so on Instagram this week, you might have seen this clip. All right. And what happens here in this clip is the goalie changes hands. So I first talked about this idea, and I talked about it more to my Lacrosse Goal University members than I talked about it openly, which probably was probably a bit of a mistake. But since I'm kind of um, on a new mindset here of sharing more of this stuff, then here we go. When I moved to Canada, basically in 2001, and I looked for lacrosse up here, and I got a chance to play lacrosse with a bunch of like older Canadian box players. That's kind of the gist of what brought me on. I got very bored. Um, One, because the shooters didn't like to shoot from outside, like just in a Canadian box mentality. Like they like to be like within 10 yards of the cage. And if they weren't within 10 yards, they didn't like rip it. They just would dodge inside and then shoot. And I started getting like really kind of bored with it, and I started messing around. That's really when I started kind of messing around with the the changes in positioning, like making saves with your bottom hand, making saves with your elbow, and what I started to do, mess around with, was actually just switching my stance. And so, over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about offset goaltending, the idea of like, okay, not being straight up on the shooter, but being straight up, being offset to the ball based on where your stick is. Okay. So, just for a quick thing, I don't like this bottom hand position on this goalie. I don't like the vertical stick. That's crap, in my opinion. But then as you watch this shot happen, right, as you watch the shot come through, um, he switches hands. And I've talked about this before. People didn't really like understand this, unfortunately, the video that I have is stuck on a 6 terabyte drive down here on my floor and in my office, um, where I did a whole video with Holden Catoni um, on it. But the idea is that people didn't believe that you could switch your stick fast enough to actually make this work. And so if I just throw this down a little bit, okay. Um, If I just throw this down, okay, so there's the shooter looking at the cage. Now, what I believe we have as goalies, and a place where I think we have the ability to make a jump in save percentage, is the time between when the shooter makes a choice at the cage. Okay, um, maybe the uh, uh, like at some point the shooter will look at the cage and will decide where they're going with that ball, whether it's off stick high, off stick hip, it could be stick side high, like whatever. The idea though is that between when the stick is like pulled back and then the shot is followed through, there's actually a lot of time there. Right. So if you watch this player wind up, now this player is totally uncontested. So this is the fastest that this could probably happen, right? Right? So there he's looking, he's picked his spot, he's winding up, and then the goalie switches hands. Now, couple things. In this particular video, the shooter shoots it right where the stick is, and that's cool. But let's say that ball was like higher or lower, but it was to the off stick side. We all agree that a goalie should have an advantage when the ball is shot to their stick side. Now that doesn't always work out. I get it. But the idea here though is that we're kind of messing with the shooter's head a little bit. We're we're now adding something to our arsenal where what the shooter thought was there is now taken away. Okay? And so if you take this shooter and you move them around all angles, right? If you move them further as we're looking at it to the left, like to more towards side right, um, and the shooter has even less to shoot at, this becomes even more prominent. Okay. But the idea here is that there is time within the shot, like in the windup of the shot, to make a play on the shooter. Okay. And so I'm just going to fast forward here um, to this clip. Okay. Um, so Ryan Brown in the was it the 2016 Worlds, right? Or I think it was 2016 Worlds. Ryan Brown like lit everything up, and so if you guys check out this video on YouTube for my Lacrosse Goalie University members, this will be in the forum. But the idea here is that Ryan Brown scored a ton of goals, and they did this video, which was kind of cool. And what you can see here is three separate shots. Now these are close. These are close shots. I believe that's Adam Gittleman in the cage. Um, but I don't like how deep the goalie is in this situation. I think we got to change that. And also, the goalie is straight up on the shooter, pretty much in all except for that last video on the right. Um, but the idea here is that between the time that Ryan goes, winds up, and that stick, there's so much lip in this stick. For that stick to be this far back, there's a ton of lip in that stick, right? But as he comes forward, there's time for a goalie to make a change. Now, what's kind of fascinating here is that this shot is very close. Like he's like within 10 yards. Okay, he's totally within 10 yards. And the idea is that I want I want you to just kind of notice what the time that this shot it takes to come through. Okay, so let's just watch this. I'll just play it. I'll play it once live. Okay. Now it's kind of fascinating as you watch this video is that when the goalie is so deep in the cage, okay, when the goalie is so deep in the cage, there's times when they can't get in front of the ball at all, right? So this is kind of an interesting a set of clips to watch because Gittleman is so deep, right? So deep that any shot that's kind of in any of these corners is probably unstoppable, right? It's unstoppable. But as a goalie, we have some options here. So in this windup, let's say here, let's say at this point, the shooter has decided where they're going to shoot. Now this shot is like right out front, top center. This is probably the worst place to try to do this. But at tighter angles, it's as I mentioned before, it's more effective. The goalie could add something here. They could shuffle, they can move, they could switch hands, they could put the stick low, bait them high, any of those sort of things. But what's really fascinating is that when people watch a goalie switch hands, they immediately think like, oh, well, if the goalie doesn't if the goalie uh, like what if the guy shoots it stick side high and now he switches and now his stick is across the body. What I found when you start to mess around with this is you still know you're still attentive to the possibility that ball could go stick side high, and you end up getting back there. But again, what makes that easier is actually when you're further out at the shooter. All right, when you're further out the shooter and you're taking less away, because again, all these examples are of a goal of a shooter hitting the cage. What you don't see is the shooter in a high pressure situation possibly missing the cage. Okay, so the idea what's like this one on the right side here is pretty fascinating to me because Gittleman is so deep, he can't get to that ball. He couldn't even he can't get to that ball if he's like fully stretched out. See that? Like he's fully stretched and he can't get to the spot where that ball goes. So that's a problem, in my opinion. Like that's a problem. That doesn't have to apply to the lacrosse goalie. Like it would apply to like a soccer goalie in certain situations, right? Because the goalie's massive, the cage is massive. But a goalie can still stretch and dive to get to those corners, like in time. Sorry, not in time. They can still get there. But in this case, this goalie can't cover that part of the net. And that's a problem, right? Because basically what you're saying as a goalie is like, okay, hey, I'm going to, if I stand here, you're going to hit that spot. Like, sorry, if you hit that spot, then it's going in. But if you play offset and you encourage a shot to your stick side, well, you can still get your stick. It's easier to cover that area, right, stick side than it is to try to cross over. And the other problem here, what Adam's doing here is by crossing that bottom hand under, that locks you up, right? So the idea is to basically, if I'm making a save to my off stick side, I want to, so I'm a righty, I'm going to pin that left elbow to my side, and that's going to lock my bottom hand, and I'm going to punch my top hand across and over. Then you can cover that. If I pivot my bottom hand under, which feels fast, I end up limiting how far I can actually cover that stick. So this is where in practice, you know, if goalies are just constantly taking shots from like top center and they're not like experimenting with position or stick position or maybe altering their stance between in the windup, they're missing an opportunity to improve, in my opinion. Okay. And so, so this is an interesting shot because it's basically stick side high. It's like, and the goalie's thinking he's got to move everywhere. And it's like, wait a second. All I had to do was move. See, this is why I don't teach forward, guys. Like, what happens here is Gittleman punches to the ball, right? The hands come forward. Watch his right arm straighten out forward. And when in fact, all he's got to do is move that stick head basically 6 inches to his right. Okay. So that's why we teach on plane, moving the stick on plane. Again, this is another, there's a shot here. He comes forward and then up. He's already getting beat. But this is ridiculously close, guys. Like this is what I mean by the lacrosse goalie of the future. The only way you make this save, in my opinion, is you've got to be top of the crease. You know, you've got to be top of the crease, taking up as much net as possible, hoping because when the argument like, oh, I'll stand further back in the cage so I have more time to react to the ball. Well, how well is that working? Right? It's like right here. He's like 10 yards away. But the ball is past him before he even can move. Right? Like the goalie's barely moved. So that's where I'll just continue to argue. Like you just got to be as big as possible, out as far as possible, and then messing stuff up, like messing with their head, switching hands, stepping a little left, stepping a little right, whatever it may be for you. But this is where I believe that we have this opportunity, this to experiment here and try some stuff and dictate the play. And that's why I call this offensive goaltending. Instead of being that reactive, I'm waiting for everything to come to me, I'm going to assume you're going to hit the net. I'm going to take it to you and go, no, dickhead. I want you to miss, or I want you to hit me, right? Or if you hit that corner, great. But the idea here is that I am going to put things in your um I'm going to put things more in my um uh, put the cards more in my favor, right? And put more pressure on you. Now, what's interesting here is that so Ryan Brown was just a great, people were fascinated by this. Um, People were fascinated by his performance at the World Championships because he scored a ton. And what he talks about is he talks about having this. Uh, yeah, I'm just looking at this save here, right? So this is where if you took a baseball catcher and you put them in this situation, how they would move to this ball would be very different, right? Because as a goalie, as a lacrosse goalie, with an unprotected knee, like again as well, an ice hockey goalie back in like the 80s and early 90s would do what was called a kick save, and they would actually turn their foot out and expose the knee to this play. But as a lacrosse goalie who's not fully protected, see how he moves like heel first. That's not very fast, right? But what really needs to happen is that knee needs to just turn out and get right in front of her. But you're not going to do that because it hurts like a mother. Pardon me. Sorry, parents. Sorry when I don't mean to swear. It just comes out. But the idea here is that you know we need protected goalies. Ryan talks about how he views his shot like a clock. okay, and I think this is fascinating. I think goalies need to understand this too, is that he looks at his shot like a clock. And so depending on the play, he basically is going to release that ball at some point on the clock, right? Whether it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, noon, whatever it's got to be, he's got that in his arsenal. Now, what happens to a lot of goalies is, especially when I did a video last week of how your coach should not be shooting on you, the idea was that your coach probably shoots at like one place on the clock, right? They're constantly like 3:30, right? And but then you get out into a game and your goal is like, dang it, 1:30, 2:45, 6:15, holy, so your goalie needs to kind of develop again that shooter library, that shot library. So here you go, slow motion. This is his full wind up. Like this is like the biggest wind up ever. And you'll see how much time, you know, the, this is slow motion, but you know, there's a lot of time for that stickhead to come through, and the goalie has an opportunity to mess with the shooter, in my opinion. Okay. So it'll be up to you to, for those of you guys that have older goalies, to just kind of try this stuff, to believe in it enough to try it. Because if your goalie just keeps playing the same way and they don't risk a failure, there's a fantastic stat: 95 and 97 from opposite hands. That's a pretty good deal, right? That's a well trained shooter right there. Okay. Not sure what the accuracy is, but that's another story. Okay, but this is a great clip. So if you haven't seen it yet, go search. Just search for it on Ryan Brown. I can't remember what. Just Ryan Brown shooting video PLL. Um, sorry, I don't have the URL there for it. But anybody have any questions on this? Anybody have any thoughts, any ideas? The idea, I think here, the big idea here is, I believe wholeheartedly that the lacrosse goalie of the future, who is protected and who is proactive, can make some saves by taking things away. And like we showed at the very beginning, that clip on Instagram, you know, there's plenty of time to switch hands, right? And for the people that argue like, oh, no, it's not worth it. Like, I doubt they've even tried it or even made any sort of or advantage. This works for the boys and the girls. Um, and again, I think one of the ways to just kind of train for this is, if you take the stick out of a goalie's hand and you shoot on them with tennis balls and you say, I just want you to stop stuff. Don't worry about your stick. Don't worry about the ball. Just stop stuff. Have fun with it. You'll find they will come to these kind of conclusions and these things on their own. Um, Greg Lapham writes, would be great to know where in the shot in is the shooter committed to his location, meaning how late in the motion are they committed? That's actually, Greg, I think it's really early. I think it's really early. Uh, I, I think I think for most shooters, the idea is that, man, they're going to look at the cage, they're going to wind up, and so the choice is before the stick is even taken back, right? Uh, because their thought is more towards velocity, right? Like when you rip a ball at the cage, you're just like, let's go, right? And so it's like, I'm picking my spot, and then I'm going to wind up, and then I'm going to go. I think there's a lot more time than people think. Um, and so if you just take your own stick and shoot, you'll realize like where it is. Now, in terms of changing, like that's a question, just to cover. The idea is like, for a shooter, like let's say I scope the cage, and I see a spot, and I'm going to shoot for that. A lot of shooters take their eye off the cage for a second, um, and then come back at it. But let's say a shooter, let's say I'm a righty shooter, and I'm going to shoot on hopefully I do this right. I'm going to shoot to the left of the goalie, right? So I'm looking at the cage, and I'm going to shoot to the left of the goalie. Um, the idea, what ends up happening here is that a shooter may be able to hold on to the shot a little longer, but they can't release it earlier than what they wanted. Does that make sense? Like I'm not sure if I've explained this clear enough, but But the idea is that if I'm shooting at you and I've decided to shoot it, okay, let's say I'm a righty shot and I'm going to shoot it to the right side of the cage, but then I realize the goalie's got his stick there. I still may have a chance to get the ball over to the left side of the cage. But if um, if I don't, um, if I want to shoot it uh, left and I've committed to that, I'm not sure I would be able to release it early. I would have to push my hands forward. Like I got to think that one through a little bit more. I was trying to think that through before, and I was trying to think how to say that, but I think there's some wiggle room in there. So anyway, I think there's some food for thought here, and what I would love to see is I would love to see people just kind of mess around with this because people joked like when they saw it on Instagram, they laughed at it, and I'm like, no, there's more to this, and we've been talking about it for a long time. So hopefully, take some time, give it a shot, work on it, mess around with it. Let me know what you think, and post it back in our group. That'd be fantastic. Okay, so all right, everybody. It is I'm actually I got a goalie to talk to here in 15 minutes, so I got to chat. So I got to leave. But thanks everybody for the questions tonight. Really appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast or watching this on the replay anywhere, do me a favor, hit the like button, leave a comment. Let me know who you are. Um, um, right goalie. Who's this? Who's this? I don't know who wrote that. Right-handed goalie on right pipe, switch hands. Um, Well, that's stat. I'm talking more like in the middle of a like in the middle of the shooter's windup. So so you could take a righty goalie on that pipe and then switch them. Okay. You could also take a lefty goalie and put him. You could like either way. So the concept is more switching in the windup. Okay. Hey Rob. Um. So yeah. So in this case, what I'm talking about tonight is making some sort of a move mid windup. Right? So let's say you're on the right pipe and you're giving them far side. Well, they're scoping out far side, they wind up, they go to shoot at it, and goalie just switches hands and is ready to just gobble it up on that off stick side, which is now their stick side, right? I think I've never done this stats. Maybe somebody else can do it, but the idea is that I think if we just did a stat analysis of saves from side right on righty goalies versus lefty goalies, I'm pretty sure we would have a higher percentage of saves with a left-handed goalie in that situation, as opposed to a right-handed goalie, especially when that shooter is like coming tight to the cage and there's like a dodge or there's a potential for like a dive across the crease or whatever. I'm pretty confident that a lefty goalie has a better chance of making that save than a righty goalie. Um, and so the idea there, and I think that would go true for the other side too. Like a player coming from side left across the front of the cage, a right-handed goalie in that case would be better off, right? But that's where I just believe wholeheartedly like the lacrosse goalie of the future will learn how to play with both hands. Um, Ashby had a kid that this Ashby Shepherd. Ashby had a kid that could absolutely bring it shooting on him tonight. He would go stick side high. And I told Ashby next time, as soon as you see his hands, get your whole body in that upper right corner. Yeah, well, I think what I would mess with there is, um, Ashby can probably agree to this. You know, as goalies, like we think we should be better stick side high, but I think what we end up doing is we end up assuming we're gonna have to move to make a save. And then what happens is that the brain's like, okay, the ball's gonna go someplace else. As the ball's en route, the brain's going like, oh, dang it. It's actually going like right here. And yeah, but then it's got to basically reverse the Titanic to move, and we miss those saves, right? But when you see that clip of Adam Gilligan getting lit up by Ryan Brown from 10 yards, um, there's just the reaction time ability there is zero. Like it's just zero. So then we have to think tactically. So what do we do? Well, maybe we set up lefty, you know. Maybe we set up lefty. Maybe we give him, we drop our stick or we bring our stick more centrally located and then move from there. Moving from central point out. I think that's important to consider. Okay, and it's worth trying, right? It's worth trying because um, again, I just don't believe that if you're just fighting on moving faster, we're not going to see a goalie have some insane reactive ability that's never been seen before, right? That's kind of tapped. I think the ability for the brain to process the ball, see, know where it's going, and then send the signal to move. I think we're not going to see some incredible reflex improvement there, you know. Um, but there's room on the tactical side of things. So if that guy's lighting you up, stick side high, it's like, all right, enough, screw that. Like now we got to do something else. Maybe I'm gonna stand um, more to my off stick side and give him that stick side and go, and play that game, right? Or maybe I'll switch hands and as he's in mid windup, I'm going to stand directly in front of that spot and see what happens and maybe take it off the dome of my helmet. I don't know. Right. But it's something other than just trying to like see the ball, know where it's going, and then move in front of it. Okay. Unless we totally stick like electrodes up Ashby's butt and then have some Monster Energy drinks and maybe some pre-workout, um, then maybe we might have some sort of a um, that takes a lot of meditation to figure that out. All right, and an act of God here or there. So, all right, all right, guys. Listen, I hope this was good. Have a great night, everybody. Take care. Can't wait to hear about your goalies. Let me know what's going on, and be sure to post videos in the group and let us know what's going on. And yeah, if you got any questions you want me to cover in the future, just email me, Coach Edwards at lacrossegoalietips.com. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye.